I recently asked my viewers what is the hardest role to play in Marvel Rivals, and surprisingly, a lot of people said Duelist is the hardest one. But if it's so difficult, then why does it seem like everyone is a DPS player, especially when most of them seem to be only good at instalocking or asking for healing as they die non-stop? Well, it's probably because people think doing lots of damage and getting kills is all it takes to be a good duelist, which does sound really simple, but that's how you end up with insane stats and SVPs but still lose the game despite doing so much, because not all kills and not all damage is equal. So unless you understand the correct way to play Duelist, how to actually be effective and apply good pressure, you won't have any impact in your games and you will keep losing. So if you also have trouble carrying with Duelists, don't worry. In this video I'll be explaining the key concepts behind Duelists so that you'll easily learn how to be a good DPS in general, no matter which Duelist you play. I'll also show you a very simple bonus exercise you can do to instantly make you a better duelist that I don't see anyone else use. And I guarantee that if you pay attention to what I'm saying, by the end of this video you'll have a better understanding of how to be a good duelist in the correct way. But even if you don't play DPS, it's still important to know how to play duelists effectively so that you will have an easier time working with them and making each other's jobs easier. But also because a lot of these concepts greatly apply to the other roles as well, so I still highly recommend watching this video even if you're not a duelist main. Now, to get things started, with duelists having the highest number of heroes in the game, it means there's a lot of different playstyles for each one of them. However, I think we can simplify them to only a couple, because the first step to being a good duelist is to know how your duelist is even supposed to be played. Simply put, you wouldn't be playing Punisher in the same way you would be playing Black Panther. Of course, the fundamental concepts are all the same for all duelists, but the way we apply them is slightly different based on the hero we play. So firstly, I would say there are two types of duelists depending on how they generally deal damage and get kills. We have consistent duelists like Punisher, Hela or Bucky, and tempo or burst duelists like Black Panther, Spider-Man or Iron Fist. I would say that as a general rule of thumb that consistent duelists are more focused on shooting with constant damage, while tempo duelists are more focused on their cooldowns and abilities. I know some people might argue with these distinctions, but there's no need to overcomplicate it, so let's look at some examples to make things clearer. Think about how the Punisher deals his damage. He is constantly shooting at the enemy tanks, at the enemy DPS, at whatever is in front of him. If we were to draw his damage output, it would look like an almost straight line. Maybe a few ups and downs here and there when he gets some headshots or has to reload, but it's mostly straight and consistent. Now think about Black Panther. He needs his cooldowns to go in. Of course, he has his melee claws as well, but he does at least 90% of his damage with his abilities. So if we were to draw his damage output, it would look like a very up and down line, with a lot of high peaks when he uses his abilities and a lot of downtimes when he doesn't have his abilities available. However, while both types of duelists have the ultimate goal of applying pressure and getting kills, most of the time that's not as easy to do because the enemy team is not just going to let us do that for free, which is why one of the most important concepts you need to understand for being a better duelist is off angles. This is why you will sometimes hear people complaining about DPS as, "You need to take an off angle, man, stop wasting damage, just take an off angle." Now maybe you haven't heard about off angles before, but because they are one of the core fundamentals of the game that apply not only to duelists but also every other role in the game, it's necessary to understand what they are and how to use them, otherwise you'll have almost no impact in the game and you'll have a harder time getting anything done. But what even are off angles? What does off angle even mean? Here's a simple way to look at it. Imagine how you see things in real life. Everything you see with your eyes is your field of view, but you can really only look in one direction at a time. Even when we look at something, we can really only focus on a single object. Now, of course, in real life we can move around, move our arms and do things outside of our field of view, but in the context of the game, everything we do happens on what we see on our screens. In the game, we are locked to our field of view. You can't point your camera left but shoot to the right. Your actions and your view are locked together, which means we can abuse this. If all the enemies are focused in one direction and we start shooting from a different direction, a couple of things will happen. The enemies are now forced to make a choice. Do they keep looking forward where the big fight is happening and where a lot of their attention is needed? Or do they turn around to look at you in order to deal with you? If they keep their view forward, you have free reign to do as much damage as possible and put as much pressure as possible for as long as they ignore you. But if they turn around to deal with you, your team that's fighting in the main direction now has the opportunity to put pressure because the enemies are busy and focused on your direction. A good rule of thumb to know if an off angle is good is that the enemies shouldn't be able to see both your team and you on their screens at the same time, because this way they are forced to make the choice of where to shift their attention, you or your team. If you are on their screen, your team should not be, and vice versa. This puts an insane amount of pressure on them because it forces them to divide their attention and resources while panicking and feeling stressed because they are getting attacked from multiple directions. But before you take an off angle, there's two conditions you need to fulfill. Otherwise you will waste your time or even die. So the first condition is your team has to be fighting. You can't force the enemies to make a choice if you're the only thing they need to look at. This is why you will see Spider-Man or Punishers die before a fight even happens. There's no point in applying pressure with an off angle or a flank if your team is not even on the enemy's screen. And the second condition is not overstaying. If the enemies turn to look at you and start shooting at you, don't be greedy and try to fight them back. You got their attention, you made them shift their focus, that's more than enough. Be annoying, play peekaboo with them. Show yourself, do some damage, then back off when they turn to look at you. Wait a couple of seconds, then go again. Think of it like being a mosquito. You try to hit him so he goes away, but then, a few seconds later, he comes back to annoy you again. Yet you never seem to catch him. Be the mosquito. Don't let yourself be slapped. Now, because off angles require time and maybe mobility to get to them, consistent duelists generally don't take crazy deep off angles. You take smaller, closer ones where you can quickly get in and out. Your main focus is to constantly apply as much pressure as possible in order to overwhelm the enemy team. The more pressure, the harder it is for the enemies to stabilize, so they are in a constantly state of panic and feeling overwhelmed until eventually they crack due to not having enough healing or losing members and your team collapses on them. If they don't seem to crack by doing damage in the main direction, then that's when you take an off angle. Go a bit out of your way. Maybe now you can see their backline instead of being forced to only hit the tank. But even then, a huge mistake I see consistent duelists make is shooting the tank non-stop, even when there are other targets on their screen. If the enemy backline is dumb enough to show themselves in your field of view, start shooting them. The tank is a good target because most of the time it's the only target you see, but if better targets show themselves, switch to them. And if they refuse to show themselves, again, that's when you take an off angle. But I guarantee they're not always necessary. You can just hit them where they're weak. If someone is taking a lot of damage, even the tank, keep shooting them and focusing them down, which will either force the enemies to use cooldowns, force them to back away and give up space, or straight up die and give you the numbers advantage. Look to shoot at targets your teammates are also shooting at, because realistically, just two people focusing on someone can be enough to completely out-damage the healing they're receiving and killing them. Now on the other side, tempo duelists are actually easier to play, despite what others say, because I think they are a lot more straightforward and simple. Generally, your cooldowns allow you to get places faster, dash around, and you can take off angles quickly. Your job is to look for great opportunities to use your abilities in order to burst down some enemies before getting out quickly so you don't die. You wouldn't expect a Black Panther to be in the main fight just waving his claws around. He has to play around his spears and dashes. You have your cooldowns, you try to go in and do something. Before you use them or while they're recharging, you have to look for ways to get closer to the enemies. So you need to come for the enemies from a different direction, an off angle. However, when it comes to tempo duelists, off angles start to become flanks and dives. Honestly, flanking and diving needs an entire video for them, but here's a simple explanation for now. Flanks are really just more aggressive off angles, usually at the back of the enemies. If a consistent duelist tries to go for a deep long flank, he can miss out on a lot of damage. But since tempo duelists are based on cooldowns, you can afford to not hit something for a while as you take a flank. So it's okay to look for paths out of the way in order to access the enemy backline. However, once you get there, the first condition of off angles still applies. Your team has to be fighting. If you go in too early, the enemies focus you and you die. If you go in too late, any kills you get are just useless. So ideally, You start going on a flank, your team starts fighting, so now you use your cooldowns to engage as well. After you use your abilities, if the fight is not won, get out and look for the next flank while waiting for your cooldowns to recharge. But it can be difficult to understand good off angles and flanks just from this video, so here's my bonus exercise to help you get better at Duelists instantly. I want you to go into a quick match. Yes, quick match, because this exercise is a bit of trolling, but that's necessary to help you learn. Step 1. Make sure your team is fighting. Both the enemies and your team are engaged in a fight. The bigger the fight, the better. Step 2. Take an off angle or a flank or go anywhere that is close to the enemies, but not in their main direction they're looking at. Try to be sneaky. Now once you're in position, don't shoot them. Don't do anything. Just stand there. Stand there next to them or behind them, or sometimes you can even be among them. Now start counting how long it takes for the enemy to notice you're there. If they see you immediately, it means that your off angle or your flank wasn't good enough, or your team wasn't actually fighting enough. Your timing was off or you got too greedy. But if it takes a while for them to notice your presence, then you did it correctly. If you started shooting now, you would catch them by surprise, force them to make a decision and divide their attention. And so you should try this exercise a few times. Try it on different duelists. Maybe walk all the way as Punisher or quickly swing behind them as Spider-Man. You can even try shooting after a few seconds, but really, do it just to see how unaware we can be if something is not directly in front of us. How easy it is to be ignored when the enemies are focused on a main fight. Lastly, it's true that in general DPS requires great mechanics, but you don't need to be the best mechanically to do well. Yeah, if your aim is lacking, you're not going to get top 500, but you can still get to Celestial. Maybe you can still get to Eternity just by learning how to use off angles and good timing. If you try to make a play, even if you miss your shots and you don't get the kill, with good off angles and great timing, you can still apply a lot of pressure. You can still make the enemies panic. You can still make them disorganized, get their attention, which can cause your team to capitalize on that and use that to their advantage. So now they get a kill because of the pressure you applied. So even if your aim is not as good as it can be, just by learning great off angles and having good timing can be more than enough. But I won't lie, bad aim and mechanics will 100% hold you back as a duelist. It doesn't matter how much you improve your game sense and off angles if you can't even hit anything. So unless you want to be a useless duelist, watch this video to learn how to start improving your aim as fast as possible.